you have found yourselves in external circumstances that were so challenging and threatening to you that you thought about everything but serving in the kingdom? Have you been to that point where you literally feel the noose around your neck and you're not worried about anything except that noose? I think some of us have been put into those circumstances and others can't possibly imagine it. That would be my description, certainly within the brotherhood. But the key here in this lesson series is this, that life is messy, very messy, at times threateningly messy. And somehow we as Christians have to figure out, how do we get through this? I usually just tell myself one step at a time. And the reason I say that is there's no situation you can't make worse. And so that one step at a time is usually what gets me out of it. And it gives me time to pray. It gives me time to listen to what God may have to say to me, either through His Word or through the Holy Spirit. But this series is designed for all of us, regardless of whether you've been put into a situation like that or not. So, today we're going to look at serving in spite of persecution. Well, I know that each of us have certainly encountered things that we would even describe as persecution somewhere in our lives. There's no doubt about it. You may find yourself persecuted for your religious beliefs. You may find yourself persecuted for your political beliefs. You may even find yourself persecuted for the way you dress, or the vehicle you drive. So all of us have encountered differing levels of either discrimination or persecution, if you want to look at it that way. I can say that I don't believe I've ever really been persecuted. I mean, to the point that your livelihood or something else was literally a knife at your throat, and someone was absolutely bent on getting you out of whatever scenario that they wanted you to be, canceled. I guess the cancel culture we see today is sort of persecution. But I have to tell you, unless you join, you can't be canceled. It's sort of like, so my first reaction to this whole thing about serving through persecution is, well, just don't join whatever it is that was going to cancel you in the first place. It's good. I feel absolutely impervious to being canceled. I'm unemployed, and at my age, unemployable. So there. So put yourself at least into the shoes of someone that was persecuted in each of these scenarios of serving through something. I've tried to choose a biblical example. And today we're going to talk about one of my favorite stories. It's the story of Esther and her uncle Mordecai. Don't you love that name, Mordecai? I, at some point in my life, attended a large university on the East Coast, very Jewish. And Mordecai was one of the names that popped up often. It's sort of like, man, that is biblical. So Mordecai, the uncle of Esther. Well, it is, what is our job uh, as Christians when we do see persecution happening, particularly that affects the church or members in the church? Is it to just tone down what we believe? Is it to somehow just try to lower our head and keep quiet? Or is it really standing up, especially for that person, and speaking out, standing up for what is right? This story about Esther could have had several different paths, several different outcomes. Uh, but in fact, it is a great example of the influence that we have been given, whatever it is in our lives. Every single one of us has a path of influence over others. And that was given to us by God. Of course, we had to earn it, but God is the one who put us in that lane. God is the one who gave us His wisdom to have that influence. So let's look at the story. There's three characters in the, well, four. Four. First of all, Mordecai and Esther, young Jewish girl, no parents. Both of them had died, and Mordecai, her uncle, had adopted her and was sort of looking out for her. And then we have Ahasuerus, who in fact was the king of that Persian empire at that time. He was a character. He was very impulsive. Many historians called him a mad king, the mad king. So kind of a character you would say, whoa, interesting that God would choose this person to be part of the story, but he was. And then finally, Haman. Haman, in this case, was one of Ahasuerus, his inner circle of rulers. In fact, during this story, he raised Haman up to be second only to the king. So the way this story starts is that Ahasuerus had planned a huge festival and feast for a invitation-only group of high and important citizens. He asked his wife, Vashti, which I have heard that as a name actually used today in the Deep South. There's Vashti's even today, but she was very beautiful. And the king, Ahasuerus, in fact, wanted to display her at this party, large feast, and for whatever reason, she said no. And so during that period of time, saying no probably was not going to go down well. So Ahasuerus asked his most wise counsel what should happen to Vashti. And they said, well, this is classic. They said, well, if this story gets out, every wife in Persia is going to be saying no. And it's sort of like, we can't have that. And so I just love it. And so, okay, here you go. So finally they said, well, what you should do is set Vashti aside, take her title as the queen away from her, and then search throughout Persia for beautiful maidens to at some point take that queen's place. And you, O king, will get to choose. But we're going to bring all these from all parts of it to you, so which one pleases you the most, et cetera, et cetera. So that process began. And it turns out that Esther, living in Mordecai's household, was very beautiful. And so at some point, that beauty became known to these people that were looking, and she was brought in to the inner circle at least, not before the king yet. But so the eunuch who was in charge of all these beautiful women uh, ended up taking a liking for Esther. In fact, such that he looked after her in a different way than he did the rest and gave her different insights in how this works, how this is going to happen, and all that. And oh, by the way, here's the things you should say in the king's presence and things like that. And sure enough, she listened. In the meantime, Mordecai was helping her as well. And so it turns out that eventually Esther was chosen to be queen. Okay, interesting story, almost a Cinderella story, right? Very similar. And okay, that might have been where the story ended, and good people were now in a place and safe, things like that. But there was more to the story. Mordecai was a very devout Jew and very devout in who he bowed to and who he didn't. Well, Haman comes along, and he didn't really appreciate Mordecai at all because Mordecai didn't bow down to him. Moreover, part of the story was Mordecai discovered, because he was often at the city's gate, Susa is where this was, and he heard of a plot of two of the highest people under Haman that were plotting to overthrow the king. And so Mordecai, through messengers, of course, now Esther is isolated. She's, tucked away in a harem, and she doesn't get to visit with anybody. He got a message to her to talk to the king and say, look, these guys are plotting against you. Well, he, in fact, investigated, and sure enough, Mordecai was dead on, and those two guys were hanged, and that was it. And in Ahasuerus' back of his mind, he noted that. He didn't do anything for him, but he noted it. Well, Haman ended up being promoted higher and higher, and again, second only to our friend Ahasuerus. And so at this point, Mordecai being at the gate daily and not bowing down to Haman got to be a problem for Haman. In fact, he hated it. In fact, he had Ahasuerus to create a law that says, hey, you bow down to Haman because he's my representative. And so Mordecai continued not to do it. Well, Haman plotted against him. And he thought, well, it would be beneath me to go kill Mordecai. What I am going to do is I'm going to eradicate the Jewish people in Persia. Every single one of them. Every single one of them. That's how I'm going to extract my revenge on Mordecai. Well, folks knew that Mordecai was a Jew, but they did not know that Esther, Queen Esther now, was a Jew. And it's sort of like, oh, the plot thickens. Now, this is where it comes serving under persecution. Mordecai says, you have to step up. Mordecai heard about this, and he was roughed up more than once by those guys. And he says, who knows, but you were born to be in this place now, such that in fact, your people could be saved through you. You have to stand up. Well, young woman, beautiful, now the queen of Persia. And, what's she going to do? Is she going to reveal that she was a Jew and literally throw away the plot that Haman put, or not? Well, comes along a sleepless night for Ashurus. He doesn't know. Why am I awake? What's going on? And then, the plot thickens again. And it's sort of like he thinks about Mordecai. And he calls Haman in. He said, Haman, what did we do for this man Mordecai? What in the world have we done to reward him for what he did for us? And it's odd because Haman, after the edict, was going to create a situation where Mordecai would be the first one hung out of all the Jews that were going to be eliminated. He had built a gallows for Mordecai the very day before the sleepless night. And so he brings in Haman the next day and says, what do we do for Mordecai? What should we do for the man who saved the king? And so he goes, well, you let him wear a robe. Haman thinks it's him he's talking about. So he said, well, you let him wear your robe that you've worn. Let him ride a horse that you have ridden. And let his favor towards that person be known by all. And so Ashurus says, well, that's great. I want you to do that for Mordecai. And I want every single thing you just said that should be done for that person done for Mordecai. And it's sort of like, you can imagine what Haman did. I mean, he was in the Deep South, there's a term called, he was doing the chicken, just going crazy. But he had to do it. Well, later on, this plot is further explained to King Ahasuerus that actually he planned to use those gallows on Haman. And so the king was outraged and said, no, Haman's going to be hung on those gallows. So this is an interesting story. Think about this. This is very long ago. We're still talking about it. We're still looking at this story going, what a reversal of fortunes that God had, and it was done through Mordecai and Queen Esther. She's the one who talked to, actually invited Haman and her husband, King Ahasuerus, to a feast. And that's where she explained what Haman was doing. And so Haman was, in fact, hung on his own gallows. So let's go through this and kind of think about, well, what an interesting story, first of all. And what a tremendously neat thing to see how God works. But there's more to this story even than that happy ending. So let's look at it. First of all, how do we serve during persecution? First of all, base your actions on God's will and be willing to be used. That's really, really important. Certainly, Mordecai and Esther knew about the messianic promise and that a Messiah can't come from an exterminated race. And what Mordecai and Queen Esther did was to save that race, certainly that part of it that was in Persia at the time. Someone had to do something. Have you ever heard someone come to you and kind of shake you by the lapels and say, you've got to do something? I bet every one of you have. Every one of you are the kind of person that would happen to. So that's what happened here with Mordecai. Esther herself recognized the truth when she heard it and was ready to place her own life at risk in order to do God's will. Being the queen wasn't necessarily a safe place. as Vashti proved. That was a kind of a dicey thing. Being called into the towers of power for whatever reason has always been a very dangerous situation. So, what's the other thing that we can do together? Ask others to pray and fast with you so you'll be ready for that challenge. That's what Esther did uh, in this story. She asked for prayers and also fasting by those people in the Jewish community that had heard about this. Up until Haman's edict against the Jews, no one suspected that Esther was Jewish. And when she instructed her maids uh, to go find out what was going on, she sort of outed herself. That's interesting. She could have just hidden in the splendor of being the queen and in his harem, or she could have let people know, hey, that's me too. And she did. She did that very thing. So much so she went head to head with the king and Haman. uh, that's pretty, the Persian law at the time was immutable. Once that it's a law, it gets done. And there's no changing like we see in our present day world where laws can be changed. Uh, so the other thing is for us is to seek wise counsel. Esther was sequestered, and she had to carry on some discourse with her uncle Mordecai in some way, and it was through different people. It was messages back and forth, back and forth. And she did that. Each time that occurred was a dangerous time. That certainly wouldn't have been viewed as positive by the king or any of his higher ups. So she took some chances, big chances. And finally, we can depend on God's opening doors for us. How was Esther to know that a chance night of insomnia would favorably dispose the king toward a Jew and help further her case? Who could have predicted that? Something as squarely as that. King insomnia was used to completely hinge this story in a totally different outcome than what it initially started. So, have any of you found yourself, not probably as dramatic as this is definitely dramatic, but have you found yourself in situations where you had to stand up? You felt you had to stand up. Probably God's Holy Spirit within you caused you to feel that way. And you did, and you kind of wince like this. It's almost like, well, I don't think I can look what's going to happen next. And suddenly, the doors open in such a way that you could never predict it, never in your wildest imaginings predict it. And suddenly, standing up was, as you look backward, exactly the right thing, exactly the right thing to do. And God helped you along. Well, let's look at some of the results here from Mordecai and Esther's service. Messiah was born to a Jewish girl whose ancestors' lives were spared due to their actions. A whole people. And if you will remember the battle between the captivity in Babylon and then in Persia, these guys are scattered everywhere. That was part of world warfare back then. You didn't, quote unquote, pacify a region by making the people living there good. It's sort of like, no, it's more brutal than that. It's sort of like, no, we're going to give this whole land to somebody else, and you guys are going to be captives back in Persia. So there. So That didn't happen in this case. Whole people were spared. Uh, their own lives, Mordecai and Esther, were spared, as well as all of those that they loved around them. They were both propelled from behind the scenes to center stage. The only thing that made Mordecai, who was a wise and devout Jew, uh, in any way noticeable to anyone was that his daily passage past the gate of the city, Susa. And it's sort of like, and yes, Esther, because of her beauty, but also because of God, was catapulted into becoming the queen of Persia, but she could have stayed completely sequestered. That it wouldn't have, that would have been so easy for her. She didn't have to lift a finger for that to happen. But that wasn't the case. They both got propelled into the limelight. Uh, do you think that Esther and Mordecai actually grew from this experience? Do you think that it might have made the two of them a little more bold in their service and accepting some of the things that might have come on afterwards that might also have been a little sticky to deal with? Yeah, I think so. Uh, that was sort of a near-death experience for both of them. So, just to sum up here and maybe generate some discussion, you all have either experienced outright persecution, discrimination, uh, some suffering and hardships, all of those things. What's the purpose of this? Anybody want to take a shot at that? Why?
It's supposed to be builds character.
Yeah, absolutely. It is absolutely that character and maybe a little wisdom. Uh, absolutely. Maybe resolve that, each time you go through one of these, that you're going to be better prepared for the next time. I think that's part of it. What else?
Well, it's a test of your faith. Along the same lines of building character as
Yeah.
well. God gives you trials and tribulations in your own life to prove your faith.
Absolutely.
Not just to say that you have faith, but to prove it.
Right. Absolutely. Right out of James.
Yes.
Yeah. My favorite book. Absolutely. That's part of it. Some of these things come along as unscheduled weight workouts. No, I hated it. I hated unscheduled work. I swam in college, and that was a mistake at several levels. One was it's the only sport that you do 2 a days year round. It's sort of like, that's not good. The good thing was that you got to eat at the training table where people 3 times your size were slurping it up. And so I got to eat well. So anyway, I look at that. One of the things was some of the workouts were unscheduled and they were rough.
What about experience? So we experience those things. It's like tools we add to our belt. I mean, painful, but we carry that then with us the next time if we see that same situation or challenge.
Tools and skills. Yeah, absolutely. And maybe the next time, God hardly ever gives you the same problem twice. But maybe if He did, the next time you're going to know better how to handle it, but you'll even know quicker that you're seeing that scenario. Kind of like, oh, yeah, okay, here's what I need to do to maybe create peace within the brotherhood, create peace wherever you are, which is part of our job. Anything else that might be a purpose for all of these different things we've talked about serving through?
I'll just say for the tool belt description, empathy.
Empathy. Ooh, good one.
I very young, that, it was during, when people were, young men were being sent to the Korean War. And in church, this is in Fairbanks, our church was in a basement building. And we were in there, all in there, it's not just a few people. But the young men were, two or three young men were standing up front, talking about their feelings, being sent to that horrible place where they could be tortured, and so on. And at that time, if you responded to the torture with what you wanted, with the information they wanted, when you got back, you were punished.
Yes.
But these guys were just going over and over it again. And they came to the conclusion that's in Romans 8, 31 through 39. Nothing can separate us from God's love.
Amen.
So I, in empathizing and remembering that, I understand that it's really important for young people to understand that concept
Yes.
and prepare them in preparation for their futures or anything we're going through. It's important to be reminding people of that concept.
Very good. Empathy is an excellent outcome. What other things do you think come out of this for us? What's the benefit to us? We know that we are strengthened by it. Our faith is tested and proven, I think is what the way I would say, is proven through these. What else?
You can use it to teach others.
Yes, absolutely. Uh, absolutely. You're going to be help. You're going to be of great help to those who you spy going through the same things that you did. You're going
You
to
kind of
be
be the seven-fingered shop teacher teaching the kids about safety.
yeah, exactly.
Sometimes you have to learn the lesson the hard way to teach others how to do it, but
Yeah.
you still teach others how to do it.
As a charter member of the SLOW group throughout school, I would say that the only way I've been able to learn is the hard way, without a doubt. There's no doubt about it. But what you learn on the hard way, you become a really, really good person to be able to teach it. Anything else on that before we go to the next question?
Well, and I think God has a purpose.
Yes.
We are here for a reason. We have a purpose. And look, I mean, Esther she saved, we don't know what God has for us.
Exactly. That's exactly what Mordecai told her, isn't it? Who knows but what you were born for this very moment. So good point. Thank you. So, Esther and Mordecai found themselves the subject of true racial discrimination. Today, we often deal with more individualized or personalized forms of persecution. Have you ever in your life ended up crossing paths with someone who literally detested you for any number of reasons, but just detested you? I can look at it. Yeah, I can tell you, yes, I can name those people off, but I have to also admit that maybe I had a little to do with that, just maybe. But the bottom line is, have you ever found someone who just literally, based on your beliefs or whatever, decided to really put their thumb on you? You experienced that? I experienced it once and I thought it was interesting. More than once, but in this case, it was out in full view. So I began graduate school at Montana State University. And when the faculty and the department I was going to be a graduate student in found out that I came from Harding University, they said, oh, yeah, wait a minute, bucko. Maybe and maybe not. It's sort of like, so have you ever taken a course in evolution? And I said, no. And they said, well, you're going to have to pass one before you can become a graduate student. So you'll be on probation the first semester. And so that was very irksome, to say the least, because little of what I was going to do with that graduate education had anything to do with evolution. And so I made it my business to blow that class out of the water. I had 100% on every single test and on every single project that I was assigned. And so when the same guy that said, oh, when it was done, he says, I see you passed the course. And I said, do you recall anyone who would normally take this in your curricula, making 100% on every one assignment and every single test? And he says, well, no. And I said, yeah, and just left. And so it's one of those things sometimes, and of course I could have handled it better, but you never know what you're going to be shoved into, simply because even where you come from, much less, what you've done, et cetera, et cetera. So I think all of us have encountered this today that is directed at us personally. It's no longer, it's not even like Esther and Mordecai, a whole race. It's sort of like, no, it's against you. How do you guys handle it when you run into that? What have you ever had that kind of thing happen?
A little bit different, but I had a few bosses just in the blue collar field.
Yeah.
They just had it out for me, and then when they knew I was going to attempt to be a preacher, it got worse.
Yeah.
So, James talks about bridling the tongue as well, and you bridle the tongue, you can bridle your fists too.
Anybody else? Can you remember somebody that just unexpectedly on your part decided that you were the problem for whatever was going on, and that they were going to somehow make sure that you no longer could cause a problem? Yeah. Well, how did you handle it, Daniel?
Like most people, not super well, but told the person off and basically said, "Stay out of my business." And we eventually agreed to completely disagree and go our own ways, but it was sure messy in between.
Yeah, it's not easy. I think that those instances where it becomes very, very personalized to you are helpful. How we respond to them, I think, helps us understand and empathize with others who are discriminated against for whatever reasons, and that we can have a great deal of empathy for them and try to see ways that we can make it a little less painful for them. That's for sure. Keep in mind, too, that Satan has known humans since the beginning of time. He knows us inside and out, not only as a creation of God in a generic, but he knows where the flaws in each of us individually are. And Satan will attack through those. And so I look at this really as an attack by Satan. And by standing up, and that's what we need to do for others that we see are unfairly persecuted, by standing up, you are thwarting Satan's plan. Now, those of you who see Satan more often than not in many things, you may not want to attract a lot of attention to yourself, but I think you need to stand up. When you see something that's wrong, you need to stand up. Of course, when you see something that's wrong, you need to really carefully look at it and see, well, is that wrong? You can't just knee-jerk. But anything else on this? Serving through persecution. We're looking at a number of scenarios, but the key word here is service. And the things you're going through doesn't absolve you from having to serve. Needing to serve and eventually wanting to serve. There's a transition there. Anything else? Have these been helpful, these nitty-gritty lessons? Have they been, at the very least, interesting? You know, where it makes you think? Okay, great. Let's get ready for worship.